A ship belonging to the world's central kitchen reached the Larnaca port in Cyprus about 3 weeks ago. Now it has set sail for Gaza, it's reached there, and in the process it has managed to create history. That's because this ship has started the first ever maritime humanitarian route that may change the way that aid is transferred to the Gaza Strip. The ship is loaded with more than 200 tons of flour, rice, tuna cans, and other food products that has already been inspected by Israeli officials who came to Larnaca to ensure that the cargo does not carry any military equipment or weapons or material that might be used for military purposes. It is still unclear how this cargo will be unloaded and who is going to distribute it and how they're going to distribute it inside Gaza, because the construction of a temporary American pier out at sea, that could possibly take another couple of months. The intention is to begin by unloading the ship's cargo onto smaller boats and barges, which are then capable of mooring themselves onto the beach. On Crux Decode, how after food airdrops, the US and its international partners are trying aid by sea. Whether this will work, and if it does it not break one of Israel's key strategic doctrines over the last 2 decades, which is the blockade of Gaza, that Israel has exclusive control over what goes in and what comes out of this coastal strip. The relief organization responsible for this first flotilla was established by the award-winning American chef Jose Andres. He has extensive experience providing humanitarian aid right around the world. In Gaza, the World's Central Kitchen manages about 60 kitchens which are operated by local residents, many of them women. They cook meals for those who are in need in the coastal strip.
Been having long and sleep nights. This began many months ago when I announced that I was sending a boat to Cyprus. And I know a lot of people roll their eyes with intention to go to Gaza, and a lot of people roll their eyes. But here we are on even if we felt already a big achievement, which was probably many people will deny this, but I have a feeling if World Central Kitchen has done anything is to make world leaders to be announcing right and left that they were building a maritime corridor and a port in front of Gaza. I think this has been our achievement.
But large quantities of cargo will also require special preparations. It will need warehouses and transportation, security, and of course people to oversee the distribution, all of which has not yet been put into place. But the plans for this flotilla at sea, which will be used as a floating pier to try and transfer aid into Gaza, they've been the ongoing subject of discussion between the United States, the United Arab Emirates, Egypt, and of course Israel for a number of weeks now. Meanwhile, American forces have begun installing the temporary terminal that will be connected to the Gazan coast. This floating pier is expected to be about 500 meters long, and to this, subsequently, aid ships are expected to dock. This project, which is jointly funded by the United Arab Emirates and the United States, will take more than 1,000 American soldiers to assemble, operate, and maintain in the maritime part of this terminal. But these soldiers will not actually set foot inside the Gaza Strip. Now, here is the singular and specific purpose of this pier. It is meant only to solve the concrete problem of the scope and the amount of aid that enters Gaza. But the decision to build a pier turned into a most urgent, almost imminent one when it became clear that dropping aid from the air, as has been done in recent weeks, is much more expensive, it is ineffective, and potentially also dangerous. Just in the last few days, 5 Palestinians were killed when the 8 parcel parachutes failed. But even beyond the technical solution that this floating pier might provide, it will neutralize Israel's policy of turning humanitarian aid into a strategic pressure point on Hamas. Israel has made it extremely difficult for a number of years now for aid to reach Gaza. There is a protracted process which involves inspecting the cargo at 2 particular crossings, the Kerem Shalom and the Nitzana crossings. The police are also infamously display ineptitude while dealing with right-wing Israeli demonstrators who, of course, are singularly interested in preventing trucks from going inside Gaza. There was also, 2 weeks back, the disaster in which more than 115 people were killed. They were run over, some of them were overrun by the crowd, some died at the hand of IDF soldiers and gunfire from them. One thing that all of these misfortunes have made clear to Washington and its partners is that its strategy must change. It is time for America to enter the event and to assume responsibility for managing humanitarian assistance. Make no mistake, Israel will still be responsible for doing all the security checks on these shipments. Apparently, this is going to happen at the Cypriot port of Limassol. But as far as is known, it will have no say over the amount of aid or the pace of the shipments that are going to come into Gaza. Most importantly, this maritime route through which goods will enter Gaza in quantities equal to 100 trucks every day could also lead to shipments that are not necessarily strictly within the definition of humanitarian aid. For instance, the United States, in coordination with its European partners, could also bring in construction supplies. It could bring in equipment to repair water and electricity lines. Also mobile homes, which could be used by Gazans who want to return to the north from the south. This American humanitarian project does not only bypass Israel, it also eases the pressure on the Egyptian authorities to throw open the Rafah crossing. That's the singular crossing in the south between Egypt and Gaza. It also will allow unrestricted passage of goods and people to and from Gaza. The Rafah crossing, just like Israel's Kerem Shalom and the Nitzana crossings, will continue to operate, but Gazans will be less dependent on Rafah, and the Israeli and Egyptian governments will decide how and when to open them. This American plan includes no diktats on the scope of Israel's military operations in Gaza, and to a large extent, what it would also do is it would free Israel of the responsibility to manage the humanitarian aspects of this campaign. But overall responsibility for the civilian population will still be that of Israel. But crucially, what this does is it denies Israel the option to use aid as a tool of warfare. The temporary cargo terminal, which might become a port eventually, poses major questions for the blockade that Israel has imposed on Gaza in the last 17 years. Back in 2010, Israel had intercepted a Turkish-sponsored flotilla which tried to break the blockade and bring aid into Gaza. Clashes then erupted between Israeli soldiers and passengers on board the Mavi Marmara. It resulted in the death of 11 Turkish nationals. It also went on to create a huge diplomatic rupture between Israel and Turkey. Yet, this enormous effort that Israel has invested in blocking access to Gaza, that did not prevent Hamas from building massive underground tunnels, importing arms, training troops, and ultimately carrying out the horrific October 7th attack. Now Israel has trapped itself in a situation in which it can no longer block all of these routes because its most important ally, the United States, is the one that is sponsoring this flotilla to Gaza. Washington is thereby shattering one of Israel's strategic doctrines, as part of which the blockade of Gaza played a key role. Yet, America still doesn't have any orderly plan of how to distribute the aid once it arrives at this temporary floating pier. It also needs to make sure that this aid reaches those who desperately need it. There is still no Palestinian actor on the ground who is willing to take on responsibility to distribute this aid. Washington is still holding talks with senior Palestinian Authority officials about the need to revitalize the PA. They want to set up effective governing institutions. But there is opposition within the PLO and the ruling party there in the West Bank, which is Mahmoud Abbas's Fatah party, and this is over the appointment of one of Mr. Abbas's cronies, Mohammad Mustafa, as the new prime minister in place of the popular Mohammad Shatea, who resigned about a couple of weeks back, but he continues to be the caretaker prime minister. The result may well be that Israeli soldiers will have the responsibility of securing and distributing the aid. They might have to take the help of local as well as international aid organizations, and all of this is going to happen over and above the ongoing military operation. And that could prove to be the first stage of a dangerous precedent of trying to turn the IDF into an army of occupation and also an army that will maintain law and order inside Gaza.